Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe, and welcome back to the second episode of Jazzmaster Reviews featuring this lovely Fender 1965 reissue. And it happens to be in my favorite rare Fender color, Charcoal Frost Metallic. Let's dig in. Now, it's no secret that US Fender guitars are often some of the best buys you can make, especially on the used market, where the price is shaved down right off the bat. These guitars aim to recreate ones that may have rolled off the Fender line in the mid-1960s, and as such, some of the features that you see there are represented here. The American Vintage 65 reissue guitar features an alder body with a nitro finish, a bound rosewood fretboard with pearloid dot inlays and 21 frets. On the headstock, we see a mid-60s logo, a synthetic bone nut, and Fender-branded split-shaft tuners. The guitar also wears a pair of pure vintage 65 pickups, which aim to capture that later, brighter mid-60s sound. While these 65 reissues initially came in only a select few colors, including Sunburst and Aztec Gold, Fender periodically introduced new colors and even partnered with particular dealers to introduce thin-skin versions in limited custom colors. Thin skin denotes a thin nitrocellulose finish without the thick poly sealer that lurked under previous AVRI 62s. Apart from the finish, the thin skins also featured modern fretboard radius and fret wire. The one I have here was made for Wildwood guitars in Charcoal Frost Metallic. And while the color is pretty darn vintage correct, the particles that Fender uses in their metallic finishes are a little bit bigger than they would have been originally. The AV65 has a much rounder and fuller neck profile overall than you would have found in the previous AVRI 62 reissues. So if you're the kind who likes a bigger neck, well, this is definitely the model for you. Now, one noteworthy change that Fender made to this series is that these guitars feature an angled neck pocket, presumably to eliminate the use of shims. This small change takes the guesswork out of setups, however, there can be drawbacks which I will mention later on. Being made in the Corona plant, the hardware and electronics are top-notch. There's no reason to change them out unless you have a preference that's not being met by what comes stock on the guitar. The only notable mark against the hardware that I can think of is that Fender seems to have shortened the vibrato arm just a little bit, and I like them long boys, what can I say? The guitar features two 65 reissue pickups that accurately replicate that jangly gray bobbin mid-60s sound. Although lower output and a bit brighter than the pickups that came before, they are totally workable pickups that you may not feel the need to swap out. Being that this is a used guitar, it's not fair to comment on the factory setup. However, most of these that I played when they were brand new actually felt pretty good from the factory, although it does seem that Fender prefers to string them up with 9s from the factory, and that just doesn't quite work with a Jazzmaster or Jaguar. As is the case, you may need to go a little heavier on the string gauge. Now, I want to point out that this AV65 is completely stock currently. It did come in for some part swaps that we will do later, and I'll show you the finished product at the end of the video. However, this thing is totally as it came from the factory, and it plays great, it sounds great, it's doing everything it should. If you're setting one of these up for the first time, you may find that the bridge rattles a bit and shimmies down with excessive string vibration or hitting the bridge too hard. That can absolutely happen. So best practice is to keep a bottle of thread locker like Loctite or clear nail polish around to help take care of the rattling and movement that can happen with this bridge. However, the stock hardware is great and totally workable, and you don't necessarily need to change anything out to get the best possible experience from the guitar. And this brings me to the one complaint that I have with the model. Now, angling the neck pocket from the factory is actually a great idea, and it's one that I fully support. In fact, when these models first came out and I discovered that the neck pocket was angled, I was overjoyed. Because while Leo Fender designed these guitars with shims, a lot of people don't like them or find them confusing to implement, and I get that. Anything that takes the guesswork out, that's usually a good thing. However, there is an issue with the angled neck pocket that I'd like to point out, and that is it's 1 full degree of tilt back. Now that is plenty to keep the stock bridge working as intended. However, 1 degree may actually be too much. Most of the guitars I've set up over the years haven't needed quite that much tilt back to operate correctly. I'd estimate that anywhere between 1/3 and 3/4 of a degree is ideal in most cases. With a full degree, not only are the bridge and pickups very high off the body, such an extreme amount can actually increase perceived play tension, making the guitar feel a little harder to play overall. So while I do like the idea of a factory angled neck pocket, I still find myself firmly in the camp of keeping this aspect of the guitar fully user adjustable, whether via shims or a mechanical solution like the wonderful and oft maligned micro tilt device. Often when I install a mastery on one of these guitars, I have to actually reverse shim the neck pocket, which means I'm actually putting a shim in the headstock side of the neck pocket instead of on the neck pickup side, as we usually do, to create more pitchback. In this way, I'm actually tilting the neck forward a little bit to reduce the amount of angle that it has so that the mastery bridge can sit lower on the body and work as intended. And one more complaint that I have with the model is that the routing of the vibrato cavity seems to be a little bit more shallow than it has been on previous models, and as such, I don't know if you can hear that, but what you hopefully are hearing is the vibrato bottoming out on the cavity floor, and that's far from ideal. Now, this may not be an issue for most people who are just using the vibrato for very light warbles, but if you're the kind who goes wild on the vibrato and really needs range, you may need to consider removing a little more material from your American Vintage 65 guitar's vibrato cavity route. Now, personally, I find the AV65 pickups a little bit on the thin side. They are jangly and bright, and if that's the sound you're after, well, they'll probably work just fine for you. But if you're like me and you prefer the louder, darker sound of Jazzmasters from 1958 to 64, these pickups may not do it for you. But that's okay, because there are plenty of great pickup manufacturers out there, so there are options. Those minor complaints aside, the American Vintage 65 guitar is fantastic and absolutely worth your time if you're looking for an American-made reissue guitar that is going to treat you right for a long time. Overall, these guitars are solid builds with excellent woods, craftsmanship, hardware, wiring, pickups. Everything is top-notch, and if you're in the market, you do well to pick one of these up. Overall, I heartily recommend the American Vintage 65 model if you are in the market for an American-made reissue guitar. And while there are plenty of options on the market, if you can find a good deal on one of these, take it. And that goes double for those of you who are into a bigger neck. This is just a little bit big and thick for my taste, but if you like a bigger neck, well, the AV65 is exactly where you should start looking. All right, well, I've got some mods to make to this one. I think you're gonna be really happy with what we come up with at the end of this. Thank you so much for watching, for liking, for commenting, for sharing, subscribing, all of that good stuff. I appreciate you so much. I hope you're taking care of yourself and each other, and we'll see you in the next one.